Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones no one notices. They don't wear uniforms, they don't stand in the spotlight, and they don't ask to be remembered. They walk among us like ordinary passengers on life's journey. But when the storm comes, when everything begins to fall apart, their strength rises quietly, like a hidden fire waiting to be lit. On Flight 782, Emily Parker was not sitting in the cockpit. She was not listed as the captain. She was simply a passenger seated in economy, a face among many. No one expected her to lead. No one thought she would be the one to decide life or death. But hidden inside her was something no one else could see. The strength of a soldier, the discipline of a pilot, and the courage of a leader. When silence filled the cabin, when no voice came from the flight deck, the world seemed frozen. Fear spread like smoke through the passengers. But Emily stood, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of someone who refused to let fear win. That is what hidden strength looks like. It does not wait for permission. It does not ask for applause. It simply acts when action is needed, and that is the lesson for all of us. You may not carry a title. You may not have medals. You may not even be recognized in the crowd. But inside you, there is strength no one has seen yet, a strength that only reveals itself when life calls you to rise. We all carry hidden wings, waiting for the moment when courage must fly. So when you think of heroes, don't only look at uniforms and badges. Look around you. Look at the quiet ones, the ordinary faces, the people who seem invisible. Because sometimes the greatest hero is sitting right beside you. Silent, unnoticed, but ready to rise when the world needs them most. In moments of danger, our first reaction is instinct. The heart races, the hands tremble. The mind screams, "Survive!" But instinct alone is not enough. What separates ordinary reaction from true leadership is the weight of responsibility. The decision not just to save yourself, but to save others. It is in that space, between fear and duty, that real courage is born. On Flight 782, when the silence of the cockpit became unbearable, Emily's instinct told her to act. But what gave her strength was not instinct alone. It was the responsibility she carried for every soul on that plane. She did not rise because she wanted to be seen. She rose because she could not bear to watch fear swallow the cabin whole. Responsibility sharpened her instinct into action. Instinct without responsibility is panic. Responsibility without instinct is hesitation. But when the two come together, when the fire of instinct meets the steel of responsibility, something unshakable forms. That is when a person becomes more than themselves. That is when they become a protector. Emily could have waited for someone else, someone more trained, someone more confident. But responsibility does not wait. It presses on the heart until it demands action. And so, she stepped forward, not because she had no fear, but because she refused to let fear control the fate of those around her. And that is the truth for all of us. Life will place you in moments where instinct screams one thing and responsibility whispers another. The question is, which voice will you follow? If you choose responsibility, if you choose to carry the weight not only of yourself but of others, then you too will discover the extraordinary strength that rises when instinct meets responsibility. The line between tragedy and a miracle is thinner than we think. Sometimes it is a single decision, a single step, or a single act of courage that decides which side the story will fall on. One moment of fear can lead to disaster, but one moment of courage can turn the same situation into hope, survival, and even victory. On Flight 782, tragedy was only seconds away. The silence of the cockpit, the panic in the cabin, and the weight of uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Fear was spreading fast, and disaster felt inevitable. But then, one passenger stood, and in that single act the story began to change. What could have been remembered as a flight lost to fear became the beginning of a miracle born from courage. Miracles do not always come from the heavens. Sometimes they come from human choice. They come when someone decides that surrender is not an option, that hope must be stronger than fear. Emily Parker chose to step into that thin space between chaos and calm, and in doing so, she shifted the fate of everyone on board. That is what makes the difference. Tragedy happens when fear controls us. A miracle happens when courage takes command. It is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear decide the ending. Emily was afraid. Anyone would be. But she acted anyway. And that action turned despair into possibility. So the lesson is cleared in every life. There will be moments where tragedy waits on one side and a miracle waits on the other. The choice, the action, the courage, it belongs to you. And sometimes, all it takes is one step forward to decide which story will be told. Every great storm begins with silence. A silence so heavy that it feels unnatural, almost louder than sound itself. It is in that silence that hearts beat faster, breaths grow shallow, and the mind begins to imagine the worst. This is the moment when fear tries to take control, whispering that something terrible is about to happen. On Flight 782, there was such a silence. The engines hummed, the cabin lights glowed, but the voices of the pilots were gone. The intercom stayed dead. No instructions, no reassurance, only silence. That silence spread through the passengers like a wave, and with it came panic. But hidden inside that moment was also an opening, a chance for someone to rise. Silence is dangerous not because of what it is, but because of what it allows. It gives fear the space to grow. It gives doubt the chance to spread. Yet, silence can also be the birthplace of courage. It is in that stillness, before chaos fully strikes, that leaders are born. For it is in that fragile pause that a choice must be made, to freeze in fear or to move with purpose. Emily Parker understood this truth in that moment. She felt the weight of the silence pressing down on everyone. But instead of letting it paralyze her, she broke it. She stood, she acted. She chose not to let the storm consume those around her. The silence had threatened to destroy hope, but her courage shattered it before fear could take full control. And this is the lesson for us all. The silence before the storm will come in our lives too. In those moments, it will feel easier to wait, to hope someone else will act. But storms are not defeated by waiting. They are faced by those who dare to break the silence, who step forward when others are frozen. That is how survival begins. That is how storms are turned into victories. Fear is the most dangerous enemy in the sky. It spreads faster than fire. It blinds faster than smoke, and it weakens even the strongest hearts. When fear takes over, logic disappears, courage vanishes, and survival becomes impossible. That is why every battle in the air is not just against gravity or machinery. It is against fear itself. On Flight 782, fear swept through the cabin like a storm. Passengers whispered in panic, eyes searched desperately for answers, and the silence from the cockpit made the air heavy with dread. It was as if the plane itself was sinking, not from the sky, but into the depths of fear. Everyone felt it, but few could stand against it. And yet, this is the truth: fear can be fought, but only with courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act even while afraid. Emily Parker stood not because she was fearless, but because she refused to surrender to the fear that was crushing everyone else. She became the shield against the invisible enemy that threatened to break the passengers before the plane ever did. The fight against fear is not loud. It does not always come with shouting or force. Sometimes it is a steady voice, a calm movement, or a brave step forward that tells others, we are not lost, we are not finished. We will not be defeated. That is what Emily's presence gave the passengers. A reason to believe that fear was not stronger than hope. And that is the lesson for us all. Fear will come to us, in our jobs, in our struggles, in the darkest moments of our lives. But like Emily, we must fight it, not by pretending it isn't there, but by facing it with action. Because in the end, the difference between survival and surrender is not the size of the fear, but the strength of the courage that dares to rise against it. Every great story begins with a single choice. Not the choice of destiny written in the stars, but the choice made by a human heart in a moment of fear, doubt, or crisis. A choice that seems small in the moment, but later becomes the line between defeat and victory, between despair and hope. Choices build legacies, because what we decide in our hardest moments lives on long after the moment has passed. On Flight 782, Emily Parker's choice was simple in appearance: to stand up, to step forward, to act. But that choice carried the weight of many lives. She could have stayed seated, letting fear win, convincing herself that it was not her responsibility. But she didn't. In that instant, she chose courage over comfort, responsibility over safety. And that choice became the turning point of everything that followed. The beauty of a choice is that its power does not end when the moment ends. Passengers on that flight would remember her action, not just as something that saved them, but as something that inspired them. Her decision showed them that ordinary people can rise in extraordinary times. That is how a choice becomes a legacy. It plants courage in the hearts of others. Legacies are not built by titles, uniforms, or wealth. They are built by decisions. When you choose to act when it is easier to hide, when you choose truth when lies are safer, when you choose responsibility when escape is tempting, that is when your life begins to write a legacy far greater than yourself. Emily's story is proof of this truth. And so, the lesson is clear: one choice can outlive you. One decision can echo in the lives of others. The question is, when your moment comes, when silence falls, when fear rises, what choice will you make? Because the legacy of your life will not be built by what you hoped for, but by what you decided to do when it mattered most.